Hi everyone, it is Maya Lotz from the Energy for Life Wellbeing Practice, and I am your host for the Ocean of Abundance podcast. In this series, Crossing the Ocean of Grief, I am joined by the owner of Inspired Life and Grief Coaching Practice, educator, author, and speaker, Sandy Lotz-Weiner. In each episode, we will look at different aspects and topics related to grief. In this episode, Sandy and I talk about the role of mindfulness, gratitude, and growth in grief, both from the perspective of the griever and those supporting the one in grief. Hello, Sandy. It's lovely to have you here for another recording in our Crossing the Ocean of Grief series. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Maya. It is great to be with you, and thank you for this opportunity. I'm happy to be here.
It's my absolute pleasure. So awesome to be together. So, today we are going to be talking about mindfulness, gratitude, and growth in grief. Interesting combinations. Where do we begin to unpack this and explain where we are heading with this?
Thank you, Maya. Those are big concepts, and when we hear the first time the thought of grief, gratitude, and growth, it feels maybe unattainable. But I promise you that for most of us, that could be possible. But we have to start small, right? We have to first attend to the grief part. We always start there. And in early grief, maybe all we have is hope. And if we don't have, whoever is supporting us is going to hold the hope for us. So that's really where we start. And I think that is really already being mindful of meeting the person in grief where they're at, and then mirroring and following as they go through their journey, because after all, it is their journey. And that's for people that are supporting somebody in grief. For people that are in grief, the same thing goes. On day 1 or 2 or week 3, you are not where you are going to be in 6 months or in 2 years. So let's go back to remembering that grief is a journey without a destination. And it's actually a journey that we didn't intend or choose to take. So this is not a get over it. This is a life change, something that has touched you so deeply that it is having you question your identity, your relationship with life, the meaning of life, touches on beliefs, spirituality, more than just surviving what has happened to you. But we first start with surviving. You will go from the initial, could be denial, it could be disbelief, it could be total shock with numbness, and then it might give way to overwhelm, whether it is by emotions or by just the activities that need to take precedence to get the funeral done and the paperwork done. But at some point, like, there is that lull in the hype of activities that needs to be taken care of immediately. And that's when we start turning inwards. Not that the external support is not important, but we do have to facilitate the moments for us to turn inwards. And if we think of Thich Nhat Hanh's definition of mindfulness, it's the practice of being fully present and alive, body and mind united. So mindfulness is that energy that helps us to know what is going on in the present moment. And that's really where we will find out, what are my needs as a griever? What do I need right now in this moment? Because when we can establish that, then we can get the right support. We can provide it for ourselves, or we can ask somebody else to support us in certain ways. So it's that quietness of turning in and becoming aware of what is really going on, without judgment. Somebody else that worked with mindfulness is Jan Kabat-Zinn. And so his definition was, it's the awareness that emerges through paying attention on purpose and in the present moment in a non-judgmental way to the unfolding of an experience from moment to moment. His part that I really like is the non-judgmental way. Because in grief, we are going to have a lot of emotions come up that we previously might have characterized as unpleasant, unwanted, negative. And when you're going through the grieving process, you become mindful of not labeling them in a good or bad way, but just acknowledging them and giving them a place, but it doesn't hold a power over you. Okay, I am angry. And then that's an acknowledgement, and then finding a mindful way to deal with that emotion in a self compassionate way. So it's almost like when we're talking about mindfulness, we can't not talk about pausing, slowing down, and being compassionate and kind to yourself. And when there's a moment of emotional overwhelm, which is very common in the beginning, the kindest way of mindfulness practice for yourself might be to put your hand on your heart and to breathe through that difficult moment. That there's nothing else to be done except taking care of you in that moment and recognizing that this is a difficult moment. This is hard. I'm in pain. And I'm also be able to comfort myself by just holding that space for me. So mindfulness is not just seated meditation, but mindfulness is so much more than that. It can be the breathing exercises, it can be journaling. Mindfulness practices can be moving meditation, like walking, taking yourself somewhere into nature for journaling. The way we communicate, the words we choose to communicate, the descriptions we give to something, also the tasks we are doing, whether we are able to only make our bed and shower today, we can do it with a intention and a slowness and a presence. That's what mindfulness is. It doesn't really matter what the activity is that we're doing. Seating meditation is fabulous and a skill set that we can learn, but it might not come easy for somebody in deep grief. So they might practice different forms of mindfulness.
It's to be present to what you're feeling, which brings that recognition, that acknowledgement, the opportunity to integrate and to nurture yourself. And if you're present in your activities, if you're present in how you go about life, that already is that softening, that sort of heart opening. Now you're more present to yourself, but you're offering a different kind of presence to the world, to whatever you're dealing with. And if you take overwhelm, so overwhelm when you feel too much to do, too much going on, too many emotions, and even just stopping and going, I am in overwhelm. And in one moment, I can only do one thing. And choosing what I'm going to do. So there your power in a way comes back. Oh, I have a choice. I'm only going to drink this glass of water now or wash my face. And there is no judgment. So there comes that key word again. When we go into that space of mindfulness, we drop the sense of other. What will they think? And we come to that place where we're just here right now. And in a way, long periods of sitting still when you've experienced a trauma, which is also attached to the concept of grief, can be counterproductive because you can easily flip into stewing and for too much to surface all at once. So in a way, I often feel that we want to fast forward through things and get to the, oh, I'm just going to sit on the mat for an hour in meditation, where mindfulness is far more attainable if it's just a coming to this moment, to this breath, this one, the next moment, and just gently going through your day. So when I invite mindfulness into the day and I walk with it through the day, at the end of the day, there's that sense of, I am satisfied. This is already enough. This is already good.
That's so beautifully said. Yes, you're so right. It's about that pause, because in that pause we have a choice. And so in grief, a lot of times we feel it's happening to me and I don't have any control. And when we practice the power of the pause, or we lean into that pause, we can actually make a decision after pondering about it that is going to be helping us. And like you said, you don't want to sit in a painful situation for too long, but you do want to visit it. You want to lean into it. You want to acknowledge it and then find a way to comfort yourself and move on to the next moment. And the pause is what gives you the choice as to what is the next thing that I can do for me. Is it another breath? Is it a cup of tea? Is it a nap? Is it a taking the garbage to the garbage dump? That gives us some sense of control over our lives again. And I think that mindfulness or that pause is actually difficult in the beginning because we are so wired to move away from pain towards pleasure. But if we want to deal with what we're going through, we have to kind of do the opposite. We have to lean into something that's maybe difficult, to start to befriend it, if I can use that word, so that we can become familiar with it. And it's not this big, powerful thing that hangs over us. Mindfulness can get us there. There's actually studies now that we know that even people that aren't in grief, multitasking and being super busy is not necessarily productive or well executed actions. The quality of the work seems to suffer, the quality of the product we put out seems to suffer, and we are really better at single focusing on something if we want to go into it in a deep way or give great quality work. So we know already that. But people in grief don't have the capacity for multi things. They can hardly get out of bed or hardly get through the day. So for them, it might be two or three things done mindfully that will grow on itself and as they get stronger. And mindfulness can actually help our brains better with assessment as to what is going on in the present tense. And mindfulness can also help us, like we said, with empathy and compassion. This is a difficult moment. I have to acknowledge that to myself, and I have to have compassion and take care of that. Or this is a difficult moment for somebody else. Have empathy. And it helps us to tune into mind body. We're aware of everything, right? So that means that we can tap into our intuition, our gut instinct. When we go through trauma, loss, and grief, sometimes we start second guessing. I knew how life worked and then it didn't work that way. And now I don't know whether I can trust myself. But when we become mindful, we relearn to trust our gut feelings and our instincts. We become acquainted with that again. We recognize that as ours. And it also helps to shrink the amygdala, the fear center, because we are moving more towards love and kindness and compassion. So we are moving a little bit away from fear of unknown. We're taking ownership. And it can also help us become more creative, like you said. If you're slowing down to make that morning cup of coffee, or you make a ritual out of your breakfast fruit salad or smoothie you're making, you're a little bit more creative than when you're just storming in there and throwing stuff in the blender. So those are all side benefits of being more mindful, because it kind of reshapes how the brain assesses and works with the reality that we're in.
It's the how you approach this frightened creature that you are in that moment. Run up to the frightened creature and yell at it or criticize it, or you're going to come to the frightened creature and go, you're frightened right now. Let me see how I can help.
Right. And that's where you're already starting to see that we are parts, right? That other piece. We can witness ourselves like that's a part of me. And I am not so enmeshed with this whole feeling or the whole experience that I can't realize that I can observe it. There's that pause again. I'm observing myself having this moment. That's a huge opportunity for us to have compassion with the little part of me that is frightened. And then there's another part of me that is capable or logical. And we start reintegrating. We're not just the difficult traumatic emotion or the person that can't cope in the second. We have other parts. We start to have a different vision for ourselves. And I like that. So mindfulness for me is almost the opposite of resistance. But it's, as you said earlier in the conversation, it's not lingering too long, because it's a fine balance between visiting, acknowledging, and then moving away and back into the day, and then revisiting, taking care of, being aware, acknowledging, and then moving away. It's when we resist completely that we get into trouble, or where we stay too long in the pain, that it can also be detrimental.
I think if you ignore the pain, the challenge, it has to speak louder to be heard.
Yeah.
So that's that resistance. And then it may seem to go well in one way because you're super busy. And then 3 months later, you just can't do it like that, or you get ill, Whereas the leaning in is this consciously choosing, stepping into your power to say, this is happening. And it's not with the idea of ignoring any other part. It's like, this is happening and.
One of my favorite words to have become really friends with during deep grief, the word and, because we can be in deep grief and we can miss the person we loved that we've lost, and we can be deeply grateful for having known them because of the experiences and the memories that we had. And they can coexist. And that is the perfect place to go into the next part of what we're talking about, which is gratitude. The minute we are able to walk that road where we can see, yes, I missed my loved one, and yes, this is painful to learn how to live without them, and I am so grateful that they crossed my path, that we met, for the memories we did have. That is the bridge between us staying in the past or moving forward and honoring what we had and creating like a new chapter for ourselves. So when you see that coming up for somebody that's in grief, that is a really, really pivotal part of their healing that is going to happen. And for some, it's going to happen at different times. And it's not going to happen every day. Some days I might be grateful, and other days I might be struggling to get there. But the good news is that the practice of gratitude is something that we can learn. We're not born with it, and it doesn't mean that somebody has it and other people don't. We can actually learn to practice gratitude. And one of the simplest ways to do that is to have a gratitude journal. And when you're in grief, it might be difficult to do that. And so you can look at what you had before your loss as a starting point. Because maybe in the present tense, it might be hard for you, in the future, it's the unknown for you. So go into the past and look, what have I had in my life besides this loss? And then why am I grateful for that? When we put a why to a gratitude, then there's an emotional component which gives it much higher resonance and value for us. So that will be much more beneficial than just saying, I am grateful for my health. If you say, I am grateful for my health because it allows me to live today to the best of my capacity, then there's a much more stronger bond to that gratitude, and the energy of that will be much higher for you. So gratitude journal is the simplest way to do it, and maybe 3 things, because you might not have a long shopping list of gratitudes. If you can get to 3, you're doing good. And it's the constant daily visiting of gratitude that will build that capacity and that practice for you.
So a gratitude journal and the act of gratitude, it's interesting because it's like a muscle and there's so much research on it. And even in the beginning, if you start with really small things, I'm grateful I have a bed. I am grateful I have a house. I'm grateful I have running water. That's enough. And I am grateful I did this gratitude activity, and I look forward to the day where I can do it more naturally. You begin that reimagining. And I am pretty much talking from self-experience, where you go through those very deep moments and you're just so numb, so hurt that your brain isn't on board. And it's a way to kind of get the mindfulness back, the brain back on board. Okay, I can start with really small things, and that ritual of doing it again and again, and over time it starts to bloom. It's like gratitude is that act of sowing seeds and trusting that they will grow if you water them. And some things will fall off the list, so some seeds won't sprout, and others will bloom. And one day you realize I didn't have to mechanically go through the gratitude. The gratitude starts to blossom on its own. It's like you wake up with it.
I can remember There was a time when you wake up and you feel like, "Ugh, this is a hard day." Say, for instance, it is a marker day with an anniversary or going through a grief burst or something. This is just a hard day. And in that same moment of knowing this is a hard day or a hard moment, I had the thought, and I'm grateful I don't have to go to work today because it happened to be a day that I'm not working, right? There it is. I mean, such a practical way of having gratitude and having grief and acknowledging both. So it might not be the flowers in the garden or the sunshine. You might not get there. It might be something like, yes, this is hard, but I'm grateful I don't have to fill in the blank. And it's nice how to know how you say that it is a muscle. It does grow. And, first it sounds a little bit mechanical, almost like affirmations. People find that difficult too, which is also a mindfulness practice. But it might feel a little bit rehearsed in the beginning, but later on it becomes fluent and like an activity that you're very familiar with, like a muscle. And I believe that if you've trained your brain that it's going to have to find three things to be grateful for, you start looking for that. You start looking at your day or looking back at your day to say, what did I really like about today? You're priming yourself to look for gratitude. And so that helps us with our well being overall. And it also takes us into a place where depression might not become a constant companion, which is very easy to get to when you're going through a hard time of change and transition and loss. So we're priming, just look on the horizon for the sunrise, a beautiful sunset, a bird, cup of coffee, phone call, text message, Instagram post that make me feel something that I'm grateful for. So it helps us to transcend some of the emotions. It's definitely a key that unlocks a door to a whole new way of being with your situation. It's a bridge that takes you from possibly going into despair to going into another alternative reality. And I think it also helps with being resilient. It's a form of self compassion to find gratitude for what is still working in my life: electricity, hot water, a bed. You hear people say that when they have devastating losses, like a house burns down or a tornado, and you hear what they're grateful for. We are grateful that we are still together. They've lost everything, but they're still alive. And so, yeah, that is the beginning. That's the piece that's going to get you to turn into a different direction of becoming resilient and possibly creating something else.
And something that came up there for me now is I am grateful for. I am. So we're coming back to I. I am. I exist. I am. I am grateful for. So that's that one thing. And the power of either saying it on your morning walk, afternoon walk, or writing it with the hand. So coming back to body wisdom, using the throat chakra, using this voice, your unique voice. I am. And if you wrote it, well, the hands connected to the heart. And that's why that practice works. It's that bringing it back into the I am.
And I am a real big fan for speaking it into the room. And I am also a great fan of journaling, but not everybody takes to journaling. For some people, that's a learning curve or an experience that they have to explore. But we do think when we're walking. And I would just ask people to entertain the idea of actually saying it out loud and hearing yourself say it. That makes it real. It doesn't just make it a fleeting thought once again. Be mindful enough that if you're thinking it, just say it out loud. Maybe if you're self-conscious, not in a crowd, but in the privacy of your own home, your car, the bathroom. Hearing yourself say it means you're owning it. That's what you're saying. It's like I'm actually owning it and then making it part of who I am as a person. It's an affirmation of sorts when you speak it out. I am grateful for.
I heard something else interesting the other day where the person was speaking and saying how the negativity bias in us is 5 times bigger than the inclination to be positive. It's just how we wired. So we need to practice this because that's the survival instinct. It is trying to keep you safe. Don't be angry with it, but it needs action from your side. And she introduced something like a gratitude practice. And she said, start playing with saying every day, I love dot, dot, dot. I love dot, dot, dot. And again, it could be, I love my cat. And again, the add suggestion there was to either write with a hand, but ideally to voice. I love my bedroom. I love this tree.
I like that. And I like that a lot because if you think about it, when you're in grief and when you're in gratitude, both of those, right? The underlying emotion for both of those, the deeper emotion for both of those is love. In grief, I have lost what I love. And in gratitude, I am expressing what I love, right? In a positive way. And if you think about it, if I go back to looking through what I've written in gratitude journals, it also helps us when we're in grief to start re-looking at what do I value now in my life. One of the first things I said today was health. And I know that that is one of my highest things that I value, my health, physical, mental, spiritual, emotional. And if you see it coming up in your gratitude journal time after time, if it's family, health, career, whatever it is for you, those are the clues to give you an idea of what you want to incorporate into building a meaning into the next chapter of your life. So these are little extra hints of like, okay, this is a starting point for me.
And also, I think what happens is, what am I taking for granted? So let's go back to health and body wisdom. I am grateful for my health. And then I start to ponder, because I'm more mindful, more reflective, how many times do I think of the fact that I am grateful for my toes, my feet, my ankles? You and I both love walking. You and I both do work where we stand a lot. So again, bringing it back to simple activities. I'm grateful I have sight. I'm grateful I can hear. And it's to bring it to that smallness, again, not frightening in those beginning stages or at any point. If you're dealing with that frightened animal, then give it small chunks of affection. And it could be that simple. I am grateful I can hear my sister's voice. That's quite
Grateful
big.
for technology.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, it brings me to something else about gratitude. And it's like, yes, it's great to speak it into the room. What am I grateful for? I am grateful for. It's nice to journal it. But here's another spin on it. Like, especially when you realize the things I take for granted, what action step can I take to nurture, nourish this thing that I feel grateful for?
So let's take feet, for example, and I'm in grief and I don't know what to say, and that's just the one I choose. But then if you actually touch your feet and you comfort, so now you're self-comforting and gentle touches.
I was also thinking, like, okay, I do love my feet. Or I appreciate, I'm grateful for them because they stand and they help me earn a living. How about not only just touching or massaging my foot? That's one way of doing it. How about taking them for a walk barefoot on the beach? And that there's an activity that is layering my feeling of gratitude. And it's starting a new beautiful habit that is going to help me move towards more comfort and joy. And it's building on one activity on another. And when you string it all together, it becomes a ritual or a lifestyle or a rhythm for you. When we're sitting in deep loss, we sometimes don't know what's the next step. And so one of the things we have to do in grief is to create a new world for ourselves. We have to reintegrate with the world. We can't only stay in our environment, our personal space. Now, the love and the gratitude for coffee might be the motivation I need to actually get me to go into a coffee shop, to give myself a new experience, to grow into a slightly uncomfortable situation But the starting point is my love for coffee or my gratitude for coffee.
Interesting also there. Look what happened there. We paused to reflect on three things we're grateful for, which is mindful awareness. And then we expressed it, and then came the potential for an action.
Right. And it doesn't have to be big. I mean, when you say this to somebody that hasn't been affected maybe by a deep sense of loss, it seems so simplistic. But the simplest acts are the ones that are going to help us move towards bigger possibilities. And once again, we're going to have to be non judgmental about how small this step is. Your pre loss, pre trauma person had a different experience. We're meeting ourselves where we are right now, and we're taking what we can to help ourselves move an inch forward in our lives. And so we have to keep on being compassionate with how small the steps are. We're not judging, we're just trying to move that needle forward a little bit, a little bit. Not as similar to somebody, sorry, not as similar to somebody who's training for anything physical. You cannot go from sitting on the couch to running a marathon. You have to go out and walk around the block. But because we want to judge that step sometimes, or we want to jump to the bigger thing, we don't get to doing the marathon. This is saying the grief journey is going to be a long journey, but it's about staying on the journey and keep on moving forward on a daily basis. So there's no need for big jumps. There might come days that we can do it, but on average, we have to just keep on moving forward on the most natural way that we can without disrupting ourselves so much that we can trigger an old trauma again. So small little steps forward is all it takes. And that takes a bit of patience.
A lot came up there. For some reason, I thought of, when you're commuting and you've got to get on a train, then there's that place that is so busy and people surge forward and they shove in and they go. It's not a comfortable experience. And then there's the person who just lets everyone shove and push, and then they climb in at the end and they somehow find room. So there's that lack of surge. Was the one thought. And then the other one was, you mentioned sport. So say you want to, as you say, train for something. You don't go from 0 to 100 or 0 to 5K. But also grief, for example, or loss or trauma is like maybe you are an athlete or maybe you are a leisure walker, joy rider, I call myself, as far as my cycling is concerned, and you have flu or you injure your ankle, not even in the sport, but in something else happens, then you need to be mindful of the injury and the time it takes for recovery. We're not so good at applying that same approach to our emotions. We just want it to go away. The fact is, you have an emotional injury that will take time to recover, and again, gently in increments, building on it. And I love the sort of Eastern approach. And when I say that, I'm talking about practices because lifestyle is out of sync for all of us anywhere in the world. But I think it's in Qigong where I picked up not doing things to your 100% capacity, doing them to your 70% capacity so that you have the residual. And we have a tendency to do things at 100% max, and then there just has to be a complete depletion. Whereas if we want to get through today in a way that we can get through tomorrow, if we're gifted tomorrow and the next, then it is good to keep some energy on reserve. Like, don't empty the reserve tank in a car, because then the car is going to come to standstill in the middle of the desert. Keep your eye on where your gauge is. And this, now we're right back to mindfulness again.
Right. When it comes to that same idea of when you're eating mindfully, you move away from the meal and the table when you're 80% full. I like the idea of, yes, you want to go in small increments to prevent you from getting overtaxed, as you say, or running into your reserves. But it also helps you want to keep on exploring. Because if you do too much today, then you really don't want to revisit. And that's especially with exercise. Then the first time you go out and you do something spectacular, but then the next 2, 3 days you can't move. So now you've fallen off the habit or fallen off the growth potential. So if you keep it a little bit under full potential, then the hunger stays, or the inquisitive stays, or the sense of wanting to explore a little bit more becomes a nice mindful habit again. There will always be a tomorrow to try something further. Maybe I can go a little bit further with my walk. Maybe I can go a little bit further with my activity, or with maybe I can try a new activity. Maybe I can try to see things in a different light. That's where we're starting to go into the growth part of it, as opposed to just trying to stabilize myself after a loss just to contain the fight or flight, I mean, the survival. We don't want to settle for survival, for surviving the survival phase. We want to possibly set ourselves up to grow beyond, because most of us have the capacity that, and we are resilient enough to restore where we were before our losses. But there's a half or 2/3 of us that have the potential to actually grow from this experience. And I think how we approach the healing process can set us up for that post traumatic growth, which is ultimately, I think, the biggest potential that there is for people that have gone through tremendous life changing events and traumas.
Something else that came up, and now with you cueing this again, it's this: we are nature, and nature needs that balance. So we're back to that not completely depleting. And even when there's been devastation, often we see the returning after a fire of little bloom or nature regenerating. And it's to have that sort of regenerative approach to it. Some plants need the fire before their seeds will sprout, and that we can look to nature. It's not all neat and tidy. There is death, there is loss, and look outside of ourselves into nature. But on the other hand, something that became clear in this whole discussion, and then I thought of, once you said to me that the challenge of working in the public and working with people, and people share condolences, and actually you're in that stage of feeling, just leave me alone, you don't understand how I feel. But what we're addressing here today with mindfulness, gratitude, growth, is that skill set where it is an act of compassion in alignment with your highest good when you start with self. And you offer self-kindness, self-love, self-acceptance. And once that is in process, it will spill out onto others, into the world. But I think, like those moments in grief or post-trauma where people well-meaningly ask questions and we go, "Arr, arr, 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 arr," and then afterwards you feel bad that you went, "Arr, arr, arr, arr," that is because we are not yet offering ourselves the compassion, the love, the acceptance of what we're in. And once we get that ignited, that re-emergence, the reflowering, the regrowth can take place.
Absolutely. I think before we get to acceptance, which is a phase or a stage we have to reach after loss, we are reacting to what's happening to us. We haven't reached the point where we can pause and respond appropriately. We are still in the reactive phase. We're probably still in the fight or flight phase. We're still in the survival phase, right? So we really can't implement these things until we've reached some sense of acceptance. And that's really what it is. Mindfulness is about, this is really what's going on.
I want to add something in there, similar memories with you when you're going through a difficult thing and people mean well and they say things maybe in public and you were reactive. And then afterwards you feel bad about it. So the stage you've gotten to then is awareness. And I think we often overlook that. We just go into self-criticism. So if someone asks something, possibly it came from a caring place, and we recognize later or reflect upon the fact that we were reactive. We become aware. So, or you just become aware that I feel bad, I didn't handle that appropriately. Now you're aware. So that awareness is that step before you can get to the acceptance. And that awareness is part of the mindfulness.
Right. And so, phase one, step one of my book, mindful awareness, before we get to step two, which is graceful acceptance, because you can't jump from the one to the other. And you won't get to awareness if you're not mindful.
I think what happens if you're already in trauma, then you self criticize because you've become aware of something. And actually, that moment of discomfort right there is where you need to pause again and go, this is another opportunity where I am aware of the fact. And if I'm aware of it, then I'm beginning to touch on I'm able to change it. Because if I'm unaware, if someone doesn't know their action was rude, you can talk to them until you're blue in the face. It's not going to change. But once the person is aware that there was grit there, that didn't feel good, they can pause with that grit, not to self-flagellate, but to go, what is this? What do I need to lean into here? What am I becoming aware of?
Totally. And you're right, because yes, we are going to possibly react to what is being said to us from a less aware place until we become aware. And then we become aware that that thing that was so uncomfortable for us to hear was also said from an unaware place. And so then we go into having compassion for self and for the other. And then realizing that before I became aware of how this feels, if it's been said to me in grief, I probably did this unaware to somebody else. And now we're connecting to humanity with a loving, compassionate way of self forgiveness and forgiveness for others. For me, I saw this visual when I realized these people are coming from a good place. They just don't know how it's going to land with me right now. So I saw it like a blank check of forgiveness for people that are trying to help and support me, but they're not really aware or they don't understand what I'm going through. But it's coming from love, because the ones that aren't interacting with me, well, they're not trying to, they don't know, right? These people are trying something. They're brave enough to be vulnerable. They're putting themselves out there. They're trying to connect. It might not land right, but at least give credit to that.
Yeah. And alongside that, we do have a tendency to want to fix. So there are also those comments. This will pass and it's not what you want to hear. Or the person who tries to cheer you up. So what we're needing in grief, to come back to those of us who have to witness another's grief, is that I am not in your shoes. I do not know what this feels like for you, and I don't need to fix it. And I think it's right in our first episode where we said, you won't know what to say. You need to witness the one in grief.
Right? How to be with somebody in pain and in grief always will come down to just noticing and pausing, because then you have to almost take care of your own emotions that might come up from witnessing them. And then to remind yourself that I don't need to fix anything here. I just need to be the witness. And so that sounds like a very passive kind of interaction. And that's why we sometimes jump to trying to find a solution or saying something, because it's hard to notice somebody else in pain, pause and feel the emotions that are coming up for me, because that's what's really connecting us, that human bond of humanity. Then to sit on my hands and do nothing and close my mouth as well, and just to witness. Very, it sounds very passive, but it's a powerful way to support somebody. And if they then engage with me, I follow their cue. And if they don't engage with me, don't like follow their cue too. But getting back to how we get possibly frustrated with people trying to help us or say the right or the wrong thing, I'm going to put it as a question. Isn't that another opportunity for us in grief, or those who are helping people in grief, to grow? Uncomfortable way, but it's an opportunity for us to become aware that this grit is here to help me find another way of showing up.
And I come back to your blank check statement. The blank check of forgiveness goes out not only to the well-meaning or the ill-meaning or the misplaced meaning person commenting, it also goes to you in your reactivity.
Exactly.
Because I lost that element for a long time. So now I just feel bad because Joan was trying to be kind and I wasn't ready to receive the kindness because I'm hurt. And now I'm just feeling bad about. So that blank check needs to flow both ways. And
Right.
it is that opportunity to go, it's actually not about her. Forgive myself, forgive her. And then where did that grit touch? What pearl of wisdom wants to come from this grittiness? Because I don't need to fix or heal her. That comment action came into my presence so that I can look at, I'm only sovereign in my domain. But when I attend to it, then there's healing. So where is that pointing to what I need to work on now?
Right. And that's one of the spin offs if we do experience post traumatic growth. One of the things we know that we can gain is a deeper sense of connection and compassion in our relationship. So that's a perfect example of how that can transpire. But we're also going to have a better appreciation for the gratitude for life in general. We are going to probably see new opportunities that we didn't see before. There's also the possibility, like the inner strength that we get. You go through a lot of stuff, you find the resilience and the inner strength to go through the difficult moments by being compassionate, mindful, grateful, by asking for support, things that you probably would not have gravitated to before because you didn't need that and you didn't think that you could until you needed to. And I think it also helps us look at life from a deeper sense of spiritual belonging or connection. You might even go deeper into your religion. These are all things that can happen from what started with adversity, loss, and trauma if we are prepared to go the mindfulness way.
Beautiful. Right, we have spoken for a very long time, but it's time to wrap it up. So, in closing, final words on mindfulness, gratitude, and growth in grief.
I would say it's never too early or too late to start practicing mindfulness and mindfulness practices. And we do not have to wait for an adverse situation or a loss or a trauma. Some of us will come to it when we are in loss, transition, grief, that type of thing. But with the simplest things on a daily basis, we can bring mindfulness and awareness to anything we do. It's basically about the intention and attention that we give something that we're working on or busy with. Yet the conversation we're in, it's about being here now, just for the moment, and trying to make the connection between whoever you are engaging with or whatever you're engaging with. And I think it brings a richness to our experience of life, and it gives us a sense of awareness, self-awareness, and a deeper spiritual growth. And it starts with the smallest little things like mindful eating, something we do every day, mindful brushing your teeth. And sometimes people do these mindfulness challenges, and it can be something like, for this week, I'm going to pay attention to how I brush my teeth. How can I do it more mindfully? How can I eat my breakfast more mindfully? Maybe it's the gratitude journal. Just pick one thing and play with it. Let's go back to the play. Play with it and explore with it and see how you can bring that into your day to day, and it will grow.
Thank you so much, Sandy, for your time and your insight. It's been beautiful, and I look forward to our next episode. Go well.
Thanks, Maya. You have a beautiful day. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.